Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Clovis City Council meeting of August 21st, 2023. Happy first day of school to those of you that have experienced that so far today. I hope it went well. We appreciate your participation in our council meeting. So I will call the meeting to order, and I will invite Mayor Pro Tem Wanatua to lead us in the flag salute.
Please rise. Join me in allegiance to our flag. Ready, salute.
Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States.
Thank you. Roll call, please. Carrie?
Councilmembers Baskel and Bessinger are absent. Councilmembers Wanatua.
Here.
Councilmember Pierce. Here. And Mayor Ashbeck.
I am here. First on our agenda tonight are public comments. This is an opportunity for folks in the audience who have an item to come before this council that is not on our agenda tonight but is within our jurisdiction. I would invite you to do that now. Anybody have anything that fit in that category? No? Anyone online?
No.
I will note for the record, we do have a handful of letters. One from Alexandra Ruiz dealing with the books in the Clovis Library. The second from Josh, also regarding the books. Third from Karen Gentili with a photo of housing, wondering if we think they're aesthetically attractive. No comment. The next from Rebecca Fernandez talking about our drinking water, and that's been in the news a bit lately. Brady and Joanne Bullock. Can't tell what that. Oh, it's over here. I'm sorry. Oh, this is about the municipal codes. So this is actually on the agenda. All right. So first ones were public comment. So thank you to those folks for their comments as well. Ordinances and resolutions. With respect to the approval of resolutions and ordinances, the reading of the title shall be deemed a motion to waive a reading of the complete resolution or ordinance, unless there is a request by a council member that the resolution or ordinance be read in full. Further reading shall be deemed waived by unanimous consent of the council. Consent calendar is our next item. These items are routine in nature. We act on them as one vote, unless a member of the council or public wishes to pull any of the items. Either of you wishing to pull an item? Anyone in the public wanting to hear a specific item from the consent calendar? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion for the approval of the consent calendars, item 1 through 13.
I'll move to approve consent items 1 through 13.
I will second that. Yes, you will. All right, there's a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And because we are only a 3-person council tonight, any action that is a resolution will require a 3-0 vote. And that was an example of that. All right. So under public hearings tonight, the first are various amendments to the City of Clovis Municipal Code related to code enforcement, and receive an update on the City of Clovis Code Enforcement Team. And I think what we're going to do tonight is we'll hear the actions before us as requested by the police department, but we will save the broader update on the code enforcement team until we have a full council so that council members Bessinger and Baskel can hear that report. So, but we will hear items A through E, so let me read them into the record really quickly. The first is 14A, amending section 5.22.07 of the City of Clovis Municipal Code relating to marijuana penalties and enforcement. B, amending section 6.313 of chapter 6.3 of Title 6 of the same code relating to the unlawful dumping of garbage. The next is adding section 5.27.512 to Title 5 of the City of Clovis Municipal Code relating to the storing, maintaining, or placing of personal property in the public right-of-way. Fourth, amending section 5.10.06 of the City of Clovis Code relating to application for a massage establishment permit or out-call massage business permit. And finally, amending section 6.5.102 of chapter 6.5 of Title VI of the Municipal Code related to the applications for water service. Staff on this is Corporal Rosano, Mr. Hausler, and a friend.
Good evening, Matt Lear from the City Attorney's Office.
I knew you looked familiar, so I just said friend. That seemed better. All right, who goes first?
So, Mayor, I'll kick it off. So our code enforcement team has been working together for some time and have identified some code changes that would benefit the community in relation to improved enforcement on various codes or updates that need to be made. I'll turn it over to Dave Rosano to present those, and our City Attorney's Office, Matt Lear, is available here to answer any questions.
Thanks.
Okay, Mayor Ashbeck and Council. The first one, amending 5.22.07, is just really to add civil penalties of $250 per cannabis plant cultivated in excess of the allowed number of plants for the property. Gives a maximum penalty of $25,000 for the day. From personal experience working in detectives, this is to help us in with whole house grows, where they've taken a house and converted it completely to grow marijuana for that sole purpose. And we really have limited teeth to go after those owners of the houses. This would give us a way to kind of recoup some of the expenses for that. So,
Dave, do you want to hear, you had said you had questions. Do you want to hear all the items and then go back for questions? Do you have one on a particular item?
I have a couple particular ones, but what would be easier to do, to interject or to let you do everything and then go back?
you can interject, absolutely.
I have a very simple one on this. What is the current state limit per house as far as, because it says plants in excess of the allowed number?
So the maximum amount of plants, or, so currently our code allows you to grow within the square footage of a 4x8 sheet of plywood. Mm-hmm. Basically, and it has to be completely enclosed, and you can only have, I believe it's 6 mature plants and 6 plants that are growing in process. Okay. So this would be quite significant for those that want to convert an entire house.
Do you have a question on this one?
Yes, I do. You know, the people who are growing more than what is legally allowed potentially are doing it for personal gain. And I have found, or I have heard, that whatever the fine is, it is minimal, so they're willing to risk the fine. So for example, $250 a plant, $25,000, that's less than a month's work, or whatever it is they're going to get in return. So is there something to make it heavier, so that way there is actual sting to the people who are doing this within our city? Because what I've seen from other counties is, you know, $5,000 fine, nothing, you know, I make $100,000. I can pay $5,000, no problem. You know, $20,000 even.
Yeah, I can answer that. When we go into a whole house grow, we're serving a search warrant, and we seize all their plant material and all of their growing material. Like, it's a bigger hit to them than just the $25,000 fine per se. If we're working with federal agencies, then we can go after the house itself if the house was purchased just for the purpose of growing marijuana. So the $25,000 is actually, and you can speak to this, a state limit. We can't go beyond that.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, that's correct. The state limits the amount you can actually fine per violation. It also gets into certain excessive fine constitutionality issues there too. So that's why that's kind of like a protection for the city from any kind of civil rights kind of kickback if you were to fine excessively. Mm-hmm. And also, this is just a civil fine, and like Officer Rosen said, you know, they're still subject to criminal penalties, criminal prosecutions for violating this, because it's a health and safety code violation for them to go over that 6 plant limit anyway. So they'd still be prosecuted criminally, but this is so the city can recover on this, like a civil penalty on top of that. So this doesn't limit the city's remedies in that regard.
And how prevalent is this issue now within our city since this is coming up? Is it becoming something where you encounter much more?
Currently, we haven't seen a whole lot. About 3 years ago, we were dealing with it pretty significantly.
My last ride along was a house like this, and I thought, that's kind of a cute house, had some little drape thing in the front. It looked like a regular old house. It was not. It was this house, or a house like this, and I was sort of like, Anyway. It's, they're out there. They're out there. All right. Next, illegal dumping.
Okay, for 6.3.13, this is going to add language similar to Fresno to allow us to hold the vehicle or trailer owner accountable for illegal dumping and sets a fine amount of $1,000. Fresno is actually a charter city, so they can raise their fines just a little bit higher than that, $3,000. But currently, the way this would work right now, and illegal dumping is kind of a big problem right now, but currently we would have to catch the driver, identify the driver, and give them a warning, catch them again, identify the same person, and give them a $100 citation, catch them again to give them a $500 citation, and catch them again to get $1,000. So similar to your point with the marijuana cultivation, the times that we have to catch them to make them feel any significant teeth to it is significant. So this would set that fine as being we catch the vehicle. We're working on camera systems and things like that, but getting a license plate, then we would be able to fine the registered owner the $1,000 for participating in illegal dumping.
And Dave, are you talking about illegal dumping on vacant lots so yes, or the question we often hear during community cleanups is that people randomly driving through neighborhoods where it's your turn for a community cleanup and then they unload their entire
Yeah, it would
truck.
be both. On private lots, we have a little bit more to do on the penal code side that we can arrest people. But again, we have to identify the driver. If we can't identify the driver,
right,
now we're kind of stuck. So this would allow us to deal with people adding to piles and those types of things and just send them a citation.
So both circumstances?
Yes.
With the driver? Okay, yeah. Paul?
I think this is great because so many of our residents have cameras that I think can really assist in identifying those who are in front of their house during those neighborhood cleanups. And if there is a way to notify our residents that they can help with this after this passes, if and when it should pass, I think our residents, especially those who don't like our community cleanups, I think this is something, a remedy for them, because we hear from those who are, stop those community cleanups, but this will allow us to have some teeth in those who are just dumping during those times.
Absolutely.
Okay, so my question is, I totally grasp the intent and even the need to have a greater ability to go after it. It's a serious problem, and it seems like from the report that essentially the vehicle is oftentimes the only piece of evidence that you have to try and identify who's doing this. So I understand how that is a valuable piece. My concern, of course, is what is the situation when the owner of the vehicle says, it wasn't me, I had nothing to do with this? Is this really more of an opportunity to say, okay, well, if it wasn't you, who'd you loan your vehicle to, and really try to get the true perpetrator, or how would that kind of a scenario play out?
It's a combination of both. So you would be able to hold the owner accountable, like you should know who you're loaning your vehicle to, but they also have the 15-day appeal process. So if they were to say that they sold their car or something of that nature, then they could bring that to appeal and show us evidence that it wasn't them and they had nothing to do with it.
And if they...
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you talk a little closer to the microphone? Last time we had audio trouble in here. I don't know.
Okay. Is that better?
I'm sorry, Dan.
Oh, no, that's fine. Okay, and then if the owner said, I loaned my truck to Bobby last week, it must have been him. Does that then enable you to go after whoever's identified as the actual perpetrator of the illegal dumping?
We could do that criminally. I think that the way the code is written would be that we would issue the citation to the owner of the vehicle, and he could work that out with his buddy.
Is there a way for the owner who says it wasn't me, it was this guy, to then have that citation removed or something? If, in a sense, like he gives up the guy who did it and you can go after him, is there remediation for him?
Yeah.
Or would he still
through the
be liable?
administrative appeal process, a third-party hearing officer could hear the case and determine an alternative.
Okay.
But that wouldn't be necessarily in the hands of the officers.
Okay, but the owner would have an opportunity to try and get the
They would have their
citation
day in
removed
court.
if they were cooperative and helped actually get the real bad guy.
Yeah, they would have their day in an appeal hearing to talk that through with a third-party hearing officer, as well as city staff would be presenting kind of the case.
And then in these situations where you obviously have this, how frequent is it that you can, because I know, again, in the report, it was talking about you can't identify the driver. How often are you actually able to identify the vehicle to where this would be useful?
I think it would encourage more people to get license plates. Right now, we don't get very many.
Okay.
So the whole purpose would be to get that portion, and that would give us a lead.
Okay, so it isn't that we have vehicles on camera or surveillance now, we just can't do anything with a vehicle. It would
Currently, we would have to get someone to confess to doing the dumping. And I don't know that anybody...
That seems kind of
Why would they?
Yeah.
So, and Officer Rosano, to his credit, has also been able to acquire some cameras and put them in some trouble spots that could allow us to get evidence.
Okay, thank you.
All right, personal property in public?
So this 5.27.512 would create a new ordinance for us that would prohibit the storage of personal property in locations that would be considered public right-of-way, including our parks, our trails, overpasses, tunnels, things of that nature. I think everyone would agree in this room that there is a lot of trash and debris and blight and things that get left and abandoned in those areas, and to hold all people accountable for the cleanliness of our city is kind of the purpose of this municipal code. Gives us the ability to contact those individuals and let them know, educate them, and provide them with the resources that they need, but to hold them accountable to keep their areas clean.
Questions?
Will this be joint with Parks and Rec, or will this be solely a PD function once this passes?
Typically, right now, the way this would work, we are the enforcement part of that, but we get information from everybody that's going out and cleaning areas of the canals and the parks and the streets. That all feeds into the enforcement portion.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So there's a 72-hour notice that has to be given to, so whoever can move their stuff. Is there a way to see that there aren't one of two scenarios going on? One, so that's 3 days, so it's checked day 4, it's gone, day 5, it's all back. Or there's, 3 different places and they just leapfrog from place to place, avoiding, every 72 hours they're moving it, but it's just a blight in a different area. How would this, well, what about that?
Sure. So currently we do have a camping ordinance that would allow us to issue citations or make arrests related to someone camping in public places, but that has specific requirements for camping. And I will let Matt kind of talk to how that has become increasingly harder to prosecute. So this is if we come in contact with someone who is storing their property in public, immediately that is an offense, a arrestable offense that can be issued citations, the whole thing. The 72 hours is related to the property itself. So what we are attempting to do with that, state of California requires us, if we are going to remove that person from that area, we would have to store that property for 90 days. We are not in that business. We do not want to do that. So we would give them notice, and 72 hours later, if they have not moved that, anything can be then disposed of.
But if they're able to move it within 72 hours, if you kind of sign off on that, 84 hours later, it's back. Mm-hmm. How do we handle that kind of repeat offense, so to speak?
Yeah, so they would it would be an additional arrest and citation, and eventually they could be held in county jail on a warrant, or depending on the number of offenses that they've done, they could be held in jail for that. But at that time, again, we then have to store all the property. So Most of the time, I can just tell you from experience, most of the time you place the tag and you notify them, or they've been given some sort of citation for camping, they move their property, and the things that they leave behind get disposed of. So at least minimizes the amount that they, and the hope is that with this ordinance is we would be able to contact them prior to it getting to a place of camping or out of control. The things that they'd be storing should be more minimal. They still get a citation for it, and hopefully that dissuades them from doing larger camps.
Matt, you want to add anything?
Yeah, and just to add on regarding how it's more difficult right now to enforce the city's camping ordinance, specifically regarding public properties, like ever since the Boise case back in like 2018, 2019. Following that case, there were several cases that upheld that same ruling and that kind of expanded that ruling a little bit. The only thing that kind of stayed consistent is that no cities are prevented from, basically it's a time, place, manner issue. You can still have a time, place, manner in regards to people aren't allowed to camp, occupy, leave the personal property on public right-of-ways, but if you don't have, you can't enforce a camping ordinance, you can't criminalize someone for sleeping on property, because that's considered cruel and unusual punishment pursuant to the Boise case. So in this case, we're not prosecuting or punishing people for sleeping or just a normal behavior. It's specifically, basically kind of like litter on the sidewalk. You can't maintain property on the sidewalk. That's the part that is being able to be enforced. So that's why it's that specific kind of niche to address that issue, where it's a time, place, manner. This specific place and this specific situation is where we can enforce. We're not, that way to avoid the issues with Boise.
Well, I think the point is, since we're talking about homeless people, but we're not saying homeless, I think we're talking about folks that don't have someplace else for their belongings, I assume, is mostly what we're talking about. I mean, the goal is to get them help, get them someplace where they can have shelter. So I think that's right. I guess I also think there are neighborhood applications of this ordinance, people that decide to park on sidewalks and maybe we have existing codes, but I assume that this also covers the general use of public property to store your belongings, right? In a regular neighborhood whether that public property is a trail or a sidewalk in your neighborhood. We're talking about all of those circumstances.
Yes.
Yeah? I think that's important. Yeah. All right. Massage licensing?
This one is very simple, 5.10.06. It's just an amendment that adds language. Currently, our code reads that all massage applicants we would require them to be fingerprinted. However, the California code does not allow that for those that have already gone through the massage council. So they've already gone through that process and they've been licensed and certified. We're not allowed to actually do that, so we can't require it.
Do we have a requirement that massage establishments must be staffed with licensed massage therapists or certified personnel?
Certified, yes.
Certified,
yeah.
Whatever they're called. Okay, all right. Questions on that? All right, and the last one is utility account identification.
This is just a simple addition to require applicants for utility service to present some form of government-issued identification so that we know exactly who they are and who's requesting service. It's the goal and aim is to prevent fraud. Right now, you could sign up online as Mickey Mouse, and really there's no way for, as long as it's being paid and attached to a credit card, then utility service would be turned on. So the goal is to prevent any kind of fraudulent activity with the use of someone else's credit card, the use of someone else's name, or anything like that.
I think the interesting thing for me around this one is we don't have any inventory of rental properties, right? We don't know if somebody submits an application for utilities and if they're the owner or the renter, right?
No.
So I think other cities have some track record of trying to just have a system of who is renting what to who in our community, and this gets a little bit like that. I mean, if I want to rent a house from you and I just decide to sign up for utilities, but this talks about the owner would be guaranteed the payment, and I think we don't know that. I don't know how we would manage that.
They would have to add the owner's information in the application process.
But I might forget. I might be Mickey Mouse, and I just want to get my water turned on, and I'll never tell you that the house is owned by someone else, and I'm living in someone else's house. You will never know that.
Well, we do know with Fresno County Records who owns the house.
But do we go back and do that cross-referencing if somebody doesn't pay, doesn't pay, and doesn't pay? Do we try to track that back?
Yeah, we do look at Fresno County Records and the owner of record pretty often.
But if there's a delinquent utility bill, for example.
Yeah, currently, without having this ID and this code enforcement code in place, we wouldn't necessarily have the ability to pursue that.
Okay. All right. So I do think that's still someday an opportunity for us to manage our rental stock, but for another day. Any other questions on this one?
I want to follow up on the mayor's point. That was the only thing I had a question on. So will we then start to establish noticing procedures for owners should the first month be delinquent? Or, so I as an owner can't, wait and they've already left. Now it's 6 months, or 4 months, whatever it is when they finally leave. So do we start to, in a timely manner, notify homeowners so that way they can get on their tenant or are aware instead of waiting till they are evicted? And then now I'm stuck with a larger bill when I could have taken care of it earlier. So I just want us to be prepared for that, or how we can be better prepared for that.
I think the intent, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the owners in the iterative basis when someone moves on are going to be held liable for any kind of baseline water bills or water usage of the property. They should be aware that they're required to have utility service with the city of Clovis as property owners when they initially set up service. So this would allow us to hold them accountable for that. If we have a case where someone isn't paying their water bill, we would be shutting them off like anybody else and holding that individual responsible, hopefully a real person with an ID now that we can track and seek, whether it's through collections or some of the means to rectify that.
Yeah, I just want us to be aware of I don't want us to be a discouragement to someone who wants to rent, because I think that creates housing opportunities. And then if I'm, going to be liable potentially for a huge bill, I just want notice.
It's very similar to how we enforce the municipal code currently.
Mm-hmm.
If we go out to a problem location and they're constantly having loud parties or things of that nature, our first step is, they're going to get a citation, but then we're going to notify the owner and say this has become a problem. And then the owner is held responsible if they don't solve the problem.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
And just a brief point to that regarding like a property owner being responsible for a tenant's huge bill, that you can't hold, the city can't hold the landowner liable for the tenant's past due bill. That's under the Public Utilities Commission Code and the PUC, and also Health and Safety Code, the Water Shutoff Act, that kind of went into effect a few years back, where we updated the city's water shutoff policies, so that the property owners themselves can't be held liable for the tenant's past due bill. So if they have a huge bill they run up, you still have to go after the tenant in any way possible. So that's why this is helpful to get their ID, so then you can at least track them, put them through collections, and attempt to collect that way. But the property owner, what this kind of does is tries to address those gaps in service. So that minimum service fee from, like, let's say the time that the property is built to the time the property owner, the deed is recorded to the property owner, that those little gaps there are when the tenant leaves, service is shut off, but that minimum payment in the gap between another tenant, that's what this is, this is what the ordinance is trying to address.
Can you then, it's page 105, I mean, the report says the owner can be liable, but 105, I think C is sort of addresses that issue, is that it?
Yes, when they take possession of the property. So that would be when the property becomes into the possession of the property owner. So that's assuming that the tenant's no longer in possession.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought I read that as when I owned it, ever since I've owned it, and though I rent it after a week later, I am responsible. But you're interpreting it as when I get it back from my tenant.
Yes.
Okay.
Because, like I said, I interpret it that way also just because you can't hold the property owner liable for the tenant's past due bill.
Okay, got it, thanks.
All right. Anything, are you finished? Those are your actions, or your requested, actions? Anything else, Andy?
Nope.
Okay. Any other questions? So open the public portion. Anybody have any questions on any of those proposed amendments to our ordinances around code enforcement? Please, please.
Is this on?
Yeah.
It is. Good evening. My name is David Rowell. I'm a resident of Clovis since 1991. Thank you for everything that you do, and thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. I did not plan to do so, but I was interested in the language regarding storage of personal property on the public right-of-way. None of us want to ride our bikes and fall over because the trail is blocked by, you know, somebody's stuff or any other of those sorts of things. But if this is really a sort of a backdoor way of targeting homeless people, then I think we have a whole different thing going on here. And if that is the case, I think this just opens the city up to an endless controversy and lawsuits and other problems that we're all familiar with that are associated with attempts to address homelessness. So I think the city should be very careful as it deals with this issue. If it's doing one thing, that's fine. If it's attempting to backdoor another thing, that's probably not a good idea, and I would encourage you to be clear about what you're trying to do and make sure that you're doing what you want to do and not something else that's just going to open the door to endless litigation and problems.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Fair point. Thank you, Dave. Anyone else wishing to comment on this item? Anyone online? All right, we'll bring it back to the council. Scott, do you want a motion for every item, or can a single motion for items 1 through 5 suffice?
You can do it either way, but if you do an all-encompassing motion, just make sure that you're all voting the same way on each one, so you understand?
Yep. Okay. All right, so let's do them one at a time then, just to be clear for the record, so there is no doubt. Would entertain a motion on those items starting at the top.
I'll make a motion to amend section 5.22.07 of the Clovis Municipal Code relating to marijuana penalties and enforcement.
I'll second it.
There's a motion and a second for the amendment as read. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 3 in favor, 0 opposed, 2 absent.
I'll make a motion amending section 6.3.13 of chapter 6.3 of title 6 of the City of Clovis Municipal Code relating to unlawful dumping of garbage.
I will second it.
Motion is second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 3 in favor, 0 opposed, 2 absent.
I'll make a motion adding section 5.27.512 to title 5 of the City of Clovis Municipal Code relating to the storing, maintaining, and placing of personal property in a public right-of-way.
I'll second.
Motion is second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 3 in favor, no opposed, 2 absent.
I'll make a motion amending section 5.10.06 of the City of Clovis Municipal Code relating to the application for a massage establishment permit or out-call massage business permit.
I'll second.
Motion is second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 3 in favor, no opposed, 2 absent. And finally?
And I'll make a motion amending section 6.5.102 of chapter 6.5 of title 6 of the Clovis Municipal Code relating to the applications for water service.
I will second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 3 in favor, no opposed, 2 absent. Thank you. Mr. Rowell, your point is well taken, so noted on that. And for the update then, you all can, maybe we can come back when we have a full council and talk more about code enforcement. The item from the Mr. and Mrs. Bullock speak about the importance of code enforcement and really the additional resources required for code enforcement. I think that's really what we're trying to get at. So we will look forward to your report at some point in the near future when we have 5 people here. Yeah? All right. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Matthew. All right. Item 15 involves math. MJ. Item 15 is a resolution of the City Council of the City of Clovis authorizing the issuance and sale of water revenue refunding bonds and approving documents and official actions related to the refinancing of the 2013 water revenue bonds. And the staff is our Finance Director, Mr. Schengel.
Good evening, Mayor, members of Council. It is math, but it is bigger numbers, but the whole idea behind the bond refinancing is similar to a residential refinancing. When the terms are favorable enough and you're eligible, then typically you would entertain the course of refinancing. That's what we are doing tonight. The 2003 bonds were issued 2 decades ago. We refinanced in 2013. 10 years later, our bonds are now eligible to be refinanced again, and that's what we're proposing tonight. So a little bit of detail about our 2013 bonds. We currently have approximately $13 million outstanding. Our final maturity date is March 2028, and our current interest rate on those bonds is 4.71%. What we're proposing tonight is the refunding of the amount outstanding, which is approximately $13 million. Same maturity, so no change in terms as far as extension or increasing interest costs. We're truly doing this to save interest only at an interest rate of approximately 3.22%. Now, interest rates do change every day, and none of that is set in stone at this point. We would be looking to price the bonds August 28th and then close on September 30th. Between tonight and then pricing of what I'm presenting could change, but that is the general idea, is that we'd be saving approximately $70,000 annually for the next 5 years with total cash flow savings of approximately $350,000. As part of this process, we did go through S&P Global bond rating call. They did look at our water bonds and our sewer bonds as part of this. They did maintain our AA- stable bond rating on the water. As a side note, the sewer bonds were increased to that same AA- rating. So one of the positives of going through this process, in my opinion. To get an idea of the savings that I'm talking about, the first year on the bar really isn't accurate in the sense that our interest is coming due for September, so that dip right there really doesn't represent the first year savings. The next 4 years is approximately how much we're saving on those next 4 years. So sizable to some folks, but in this case, we're saving the users and the developers both money until the bonds mature. So also on the call, I do have bond counsel, I have the underwriters, and there's other folks not in this room if you have any further questions. But my recommendation, staff's recommendation, is to authorize the resolution to sell the bonds to refinance the 2013 bonds. And that concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Thanks, Jay. Questions?
That is my question, Jay, because you guys wrote in here that it is recommended that we review it and that we forward any comments or questions. But I look at it and go, what do I look for and what do I question? Because it's so specific to people who understand this stuff. So I guess my question is, you have looked it over, and you are assuring us this is something that we can stand behind staff's recommendation, that this is the language written in this preliminary official statement is standard, and this is what something we
Yes, and staff has spent considerable time, myself in finance, public utilities, bond counsel. There's been quite a bit of time and due diligence spent on this process. The main thing to take away here is that we've been financing and refinancing for 20 years now. Interest rates are going up, and this is basically probably likely the best and final opportunity to refinance these bonds before they term out over the next 5 years. If it was deemed to not go forward, then we would just make the bond payments as prescribed, and we would not go through with the bond refinancing. The risk to council to not do that is, there is a chance, as small as it may be, for interest rates to vary and become more favorable, but nobody that worked on this bond believes that to be true.
And then it says here, purchasers of the bonds will not receive certificates representing their interest in the, they get that from DTC, meaning the Depository Trust. So they're not getting it from purchasing here. They have to go through that company to get all that information.
Correct. So we have underwriters that go out and sell the bonds on our behalf, and then in return, we refund the existing 2013 with those proceeds.
Okay. And then the one statement I had a question on is, it states in a paragraph sentence by itself, the city is not funding a debt service reserve fund for the 2023 bonds. And so it makes very, can you explain that, why that was put out and identified like that?
So depending on the bond issuance and size, at times it's in the city's interest to put aside a reserve, whether it's required for favorable ratings, but in this case, with the 5-year term left, it was deemed not necessary to put aside any additional reserve funds. It's quite common on a new issuance to put aside that guaranteed fund so that if something kind of does go sideways, there is some funds set aside to start to address that, but in this case, it wasn't deemed necessary just based on the length of the bond still to go.
And then with the savings of approximately 350,000, where does that go? Does that go to water?
Yes.
Essentially?
Yes, so this debt issued right now is currently split between the users and the developers. The savings also goes in that same proportion of the debt service as it relates to the savings. The users save money, the developer's side of it also saves money in the refinance.
Okay, thank you. Excellent, Jay. Thank you.
I have a couple questions. I think, like refinancing a house, not that 70,000 is nothing, but in the scope of the size of the debt, it's pretty small. The cost of refinancing in terms of staff is, you're still deeming it worth our while to refinance for that $70,000 a year savings?
Yes. Yes, it is savings to the system. The staff cost at this point has mainly been front-loaded, and an investment has been made. There's no guarantees on any of the refinancing, just like your home. So when we started this process, it was more favorable than it is now. But as far as through the process as we are, staff recommends that we complete the process.
But we've had some cost, I assume, with the bond counsel and others. So I mean, there's in your opinion, it's still a worthwhile.
Yes, the savings that's referenced is typically after those fees have been paid.
Oh, I see. Okay. And then I just had a question about, there was a couple things in here where it talked about the refunding plan and the debt service schedule, and there was no numbers in them. Is that intentional?
At this point in the document, yes. So
okay.
Not enough is known about the pricing to be able to populate that table. The final official statement will have all of those facts and figures in there.
And I think it's important because you talk about the scope of this. This isn't expanding our system. This isn't going to the northwest or the northeast. This is our current debt that we have for the system we have today. Yeah?
Correct, and it's only being done for interest savings.
Got it. Okay. Even I can do that math. Thanks, Jay. All right, thank you. Any other questions for staff? Anyone in the audience have any questions? Anyone online have any questions?
No.
Any comment from the bond counsel or others online? No? All right. Close the public portion and bring it back to the council.
I'll make a motion for a resolution, the City Council authorizing the issuance and sale of water revenue refunding bonds and approving documents and official actions relating to the refinancing of the 2013 water revenue bonds.
I'll second.
There's a motion, a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. 3 in favor, no opposed, and 2 absent. I think it's pretty exciting that the maturity date's like close-ish.
Yeah.
Because when we took these out, they seemed like 2028 was a really long way away.
In fact, it was.
And in fact, it's not anymore. True enough. All right. Thank you so much. Next item is consider an assessment increase election in Landscape Maintenance District Number 1, benefit zones 2 and 5. And the staff on this is Paul Armendariz.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council.
Hey, friend, Eric Aller.
And Eric Aller, yes, Parks Manager. All right, starting with a quick overview of the LMD zones. We have 51 total zones within the Landscape Maintenance District number 1. Zones 1 through 6 require a 218 election to increase assessments in those zones. Zones 7 through 49, the southeast zone, which is Loma Vista, the northwest, which is Heritage Grove, don't typically require a 218. A 218 election is required if we are proposing to increase rates more than what the covenant allows. So you may recall we were in front of council back in May doing the annual levies. That was primarily for those zones where we recommended either a CPI or a escalator for those zones. Tonight, we're specifically discussing zones 2 and 5. Zones 2 and 5 are currently in need of an assessment increase, which will require a Prop 218 election. So moving on to Zone 2. Zone 2 is the street side and street median landscaping. The exhibit to the right shows the benefit zone bounded by that yellow line. You have Sunnyside on the west, Locan to the east, Hernan to the north, and our southern city limits. The last assessment election was passed in 2018. That was roughly a $13 per year increase. We typically shoot for forecast out 5 years for the next election if one is needed. And so our current rate is $100 per year. Our proposed rate, should this election pass, is $123 per year, which is a proposed increase of roughly $23 per year, a little under $2 per month. So the status of Zone 2. Zone 2 is currently maintained by contract services. Service to most sites is currently limited to one time every 2 to 3 weeks. We're currently unable, with the revenues that we are receiving, we're currently unable to replace dead and missing trees. We try to remove that material, but we're unable to replant. Zone 2 will reach a deficit spending in 2024, so we're right at that 5-year mark roughly of where we will need to increase those rates. Moving on to Zone 5. Zone 5 follows pretty much the same boundary as Zone 2, but these are the neighborhood parks within that yellow bounded area. The last election passed in 2013, so roughly 10 years ago, and that was a $10 per year increase. We did try and went out with an election in 2016 and in 2022. Both elections failed by only a couple votes both times, I believe. The current rate in that zone is $50 per year. Our proposed rate, should this pass, to be $75, or a little over $75 per year, and that's an increase of roughly $25 per year, a little over $2 per month. The status of Zone 5, because we haven't had an election in 10 years, Zone 5 is really in dire need of a rate increase. The maintenance currently is provided by city staff. The expenses are currently exceeding our revenues. Our maintenance is already reduced. We really only address safety issues with removal of that equipment. Say if we have a slide or something that has a safety issue with it, we'll remove it and not replace it due to funding. The oldest playground is almost 30 years old. The average playground is about 17 years, and many parks are in need of repair and maintenance in that zone. So should council authorize staff to proceed with an election, the proposed election timeline is as follows. Between now and September 22nd, we will send out some flyers and do some social media posts with some education material. The September 22nd is the deadline for us to mail out ballots. November 6th is we would conduct a public hearing, and that's the deadline to submit the ballots from our residents. November 7th, the day after, we'll tabulate the ballots, and then November 13th, we come back to council to report the results. So with that, in closing, our staff's recommendation is for council to authorize staff to proceed with an assessment increase election in Landscape Maintenance District 1, and specifically benefit zones 2 and 5. And with that, Eric and I are available for questions.
Thanks. Well, I just have one quick question, maybe just say it's the same geography, same basic outline. 2 ballots, 1 ballot. 1 ballot, 2 questions, 2 ballots.
1 ballot, 2 questions.
Okay. And then I should know the answer to this, but I don't. So my street is white. My street is not in the zone district, but I still benefit from the trees and I don't have a neighborhood park. Can you remind me, is it an age thing of the neighborhood? Is that how these zone districts were formed?
Yeah, my understanding is it's the timing of when the covenants were signed, and so your neighborhood was likely built or constructed before the highlighted areas where those covenants were signed for those residents to pay into the LMD. The one-off parcels, you can see when a parcel comes in with a building permit for an expansion of a house or a patio cover, we will have a covenant signed at that time, and they will be added to the LMD zone at that point.
Is there any way to, because in that corridor, there's not very many is there a way to, if those people wanted to vote to be in the zone district, or is that not an option because the covenant on the property's already come and gone? I mean, it's just interesting because I and my 15 neighbors, obviously we still appreciate all that stuff, but we're not paying any of that. And I never have really totally understood that. And when you look at this map, it's quite clear. So is there a way to invite houses into the zone district?
That's a good question. I think there is, but there's laws that regulate how that's done.
Well, I'm sure there have to be, but I mean, it might be worth checking out. I think this is something we all benefit from. I think people would be surprised to go, yes, those 15 houses, they don't pay for any of this, but I'm going to be the first to complain about a dead tree or whatever. So I just think it'd be interesting to know what that might be. I don't know if people would want to do that. I'm not speaking for my neighbors, but it's curious that there's not many white spots left in that corridor in particular. I don't know. It'd be worth just checking out.
Scott may be able to answer.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, if I could. It would require a vote for anyone who's not in the district currently. So and I believe the city may have looked at a citywide LMD at some point, because there are a number of residences that are not included within one of the zones in the LMD, but it would require basically a majority vote approval for those not in it to be included in it. So, and
that's a different vote than a 218 vote that you're talking about here?
Slightly different, but yes. I mean, they would have to approve getting in the district. And again, all of the people in green have already approved themselves being in the district. So the district came into effect after all those green homes were constructed. But basically, to encompass all the people that aren't already included in the district would require that they approve themselves being in the district and paying an assessment and all of that. So,
and just to clarify, it's not parcel by parcel deciding it. It would be a collective decision.
It would be a collective decision.
Correct.
So it couldn't be just, one person votes yes and someone else votes no, the one's in. It would be basically annexing territory into the district, and it would be a majority vote of the entire area to be annexed. All in or all out.
Scott, when they got in, it was only one voter, because it was a developer who was doing 100 acres, and now it's 50 owners, or a lot more. So it's harder now because of that, potentially.
You're correct. Yeah. It's based on property owners. So again, a developer may own all 40 acres. He or she would approve being annexed into the district at that time when it's 40 acres, and then if it's subsequently subdivided, everyone within there is subject to it. You're right. So
I suppose in this case, you have to, everybody whose parcel is white in the whole yellow bounded area would have to vote to be annexed, not just the strip down Temperance or whatever, where all of it's green and there's just a few parcels that are not? Okay. That's very interesting. All right.
Is there a way to break or create more zones so that way the votes are smaller? Because we have 49 zones, is what it says in here, right? And I know each zone does something different. Is that?
I'd probably let the engineer speak to that, because it's based on the benefit that is derived from each individual property. So the more you splice it up.
And my understanding of adding zones would require 50% plus one of return ballots to create that zone. So that would be the challenge there.
Okay.
With the one-off parcels, I'd have to talk to our engineer, Francisco, and maybe further discussion with the city attorney. I don't know if we could say, hey, come in and sign a covenant and get yourself in like we do with the building permits where we require them to sign a covenant and they come in the LMD at that point, those one-offs like that. I'm not sure if that's something that we can do without an election.
It's just that, I mean, I bet you anything that nobody would even believe that it wasn't a kind of a universal zone. I mean, I understand conceptually how we got there, but I just think it's pretty interesting that that it's not everybody in, and it's not about me, but in where I live, everybody is green except the street I live on-ish, which is, I feel kind of bad. Can I contribute? No, I'm just kidding. But I mean, it's an interesting question when you look at it this way. Maybe we have tried the citywide LMDs and all of that, but I do think there's something about, now maybe not everybody wants to be in, but if 50% plus one in that zone wanted to be added, the revenue would be significant to the zone.
Yes.
Right? And you're maintaining the entire zone for the benefit of all of us who live there. And this is not just, this is every zone is the same story. And I know that's not our question tonight, but it's an interesting question about that going forward as a way to.
That's something we'll look into for sure.
Yeah, just to think a little bit about. Anyway, enough of me. Bob.
To the mayor's point, so everyone in green is paying for zone 2, street and side median for every street in zone 2, or is it only where the blues are at?
There is some general fund areas in there.
Okay.
So not every street, but
a majority
of
them. Yeah.
So to the mayor's point, there are neighborhoods whose street is being benefited by the other residents paying into this LMD.
That's
Definitely.
correct.
And parks too, potentially, yeah. Okay. Eric, you said earlier that it's one ballot, 2 votes. I'm in the zone, but I'm not orange for zone 5. I'm green for zone 2, so will I get a ballot that only has one question, or I get a ballot with 2 questions?
You'll receive one ballot with one question.
Okay.
Only those parcels that are currently paying into both zones will receive one ballot with 2 questions. And the reason for that is cost, the cost of mailing out ballots, just to save some cost there.
And for the benefit of the public, Eric, Scott, can you, just for the record, explain why, even though I live in here and me voting for it going to a vote is not a conflict of interest? So that way, and Lynn also lives in the area, because there's 49 zones, but yet we can vote on it and not be in conflict.
Correct. A couple of reasons. Number one, just as the council can vote on water rate increases, sewer rate increases, garbage increases, other general plan, things that have a large applicability for, a large number of residents, not just specific to your property. That's what we're doing here. This is a big enough zone that has a big enough impact. It's not specifically related to any one of your properties, even if you're within one of those zones. The second reason is even the approval tonight by you is only initiating the process. Ultimately, it goes to a vote by everybody in that zone. It could fail. As Paul had said before, I think for one of the zones, it's failed the last 2 times I think we went out for a Prop 218 ballot. So again, your approval tonight is simply initiating the process to go out to the vote, a mail ballot election by everybody within that zone. So your action tonight doesn't increase the assessments. It still would have to go to a vote.
Anything else?
When you talked about mailing the ballots out and the process of kind of doing public information via social media, et cetera, will that include, and could you let us know what it looks like if these elections were to fail? What kind of services would have to be cut, and how do we make sure that we clearly communicate the benefit, but then also the potential consequences of the results of the election?
Yes, so we would state the facts of education, facts of what that area would look like if and if not.
Is it allowed to be included, information like that to be included with the ballot? Because I'm just afraid if it's social media, I want to make sure that people who receive a ballot genuinely understand what it is they're voting on.
As I remember, the last ballot does have language regarding the consequences of it not passing.
Okay.
And I think it just mentions that the services will be reduced. Mm-hmm. But I don't remember getting specific, just saying services would be reduced.
We can educate, but we can't advocate.
That was kind of the balance I was looking for. Okay.
Because I'm older, I love the public utility signs that I called John one day when I drove by when you were working on a well and you had a sign out in front of the truck that just said, basically, relax, we're just working on the well, everything's fine. So I don't know if it would make sense to put up signs in the neighborhood park, just like small, you know, the kind of signs for a campaign that just say, watch for your 218 ballot, because I don't think people know what those even are. And if I'm a mom using a park, maybe that I would pay attention then to getting the mail. I just think trying to get in kind of more ordinary ways. Not everyone is doing social media. Our staff does a fabulous job. Chad and Ty and others, all of you. I mean, it's great, but there's probably nothing better than a mom taking, or a dad or a grandma taking somebody to a park, saying, hey, this is, and I know it's time and a little bit of cost, but I do think it's worth it. And extra kudos, that sign for the well, I just think people don't know. They don't have time to look on social media. They don't even know what they're looking for. So anyway, just a thought on a way to educate, not advocate, but educate. Coming soon to your mailbox. Watch for something about this park. And I think maybe people would pay attention to that. Just a thought.
No, I think that's a great idea. Eric and I are just having a sidebar conversation that we'll look into that for sure for these parks.
Love your signs. Love your signs in public utilities.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
So the increases on Zone 2 that's up there right now, it shows the last one was $12.84 per year. Now we're looking at $23.06. Can you explain what the components of the need for the increase are? I mean, everybody knows prices go up, inflation, et cetera, but is there anything other than those kind of standard things that we're looking that we need additional revenue to accomplish at this point?
Well, what we look at is the current revenue and the current expense, and then we look at the service that we're providing. If we need to, obviously we need to provide better service, so we have a formula or a spreadsheet that we increase the rate and we see what the reserves and the maintenance that we can spend come out at. And then we shoot for not having to come back for an election for 5 years, because we want to go out about 5 years. And then we also look for trying to build some reserves so that if the election does pass, we can show something for it rather than just maintaining what we have. We can go replace some trees and do some things like that.
But is there anything, I mean, like, for example, if, transit comes and they say, well, we need all this money because the cost of our buses has gone up 3 times because we had all these, issues and supply chain things. Is there anything that would be kind of out of the ordinary that we've experienced in the last 5 years that would contribute to that? Or is this really just the basics, hey, every 5 years we really come back and this is the figure this time?
I think it's the basis and to increase services in those areas for our contract. We're coming to the term of a 3-year maintenance contract, and we've kept that cost that we're paying the contractor flat for 3 years at 10 cents per square foot, I think it is. We're hoping to get this to pass, and then we can pay the contractor a little bit more to have a better maintenance level or service of maintenance in that area, in addition to replace some trees and stuff that have died. So that's what we're looking.
Well, I think the reality is some of that playground equipment at 30 years old is time to come out, and I think people would start to notice if there was no playground equipment. So, that is what's going to happen, to your point. That is what's going to happen, because we don't want kids playing on unsafe equipment. It's not complicated, but those things don't last forever. So I think there's some very solid reasons. But anyway, all right, well done. Any other questions? One more?
I just want to say also, with regards to the zones, those of us living kind of on Locan, across the street, you have a different zone. And I think neighbors get confused going, why are their trees all trimmed, bushes all, manicured very well, and ours aren't? And it wasn't until I got on the council that I understood these zones and said, you belong to zone 2 and I'm zone whatever, 3, and so that's why it's a different contractor taking care of it. And I think as a city, sometimes it's difficult to make it all look uniform with the different zones, with one zone not approving. Now we're going to have to pick up the slack somehow. And so hopefully, we can also educate so that citizens know that you're at the border, so they see what the difference is.
All right, I've lost track of where I might be, but I think I'll open the public comment. Anybody in the audience having a comment on this? Did I already do this once? I guess not. Go ahead, David, of course. You have to go over there. Come on, you're trying to save 4 steps.
I thought you could probably hear me, but...
We can, but for posterity.
Of course, thank you. Again, David Rowell, longtime resident of the city of Clovis. I just want to pile on Mayor Ashbeck's comment. I don't think it would be inappropriate if there were a sign in the park that said, this lovely park, this beautiful equipment, that foam footing that your kid just landed on when he fell off the slide. That's all here because you pay $2 a month. Thank you very much. I think that would be a helpful thing.
I have always thought, I've said this 100 times, I think it was Phoenix a long time ago, but they used to have signs on vacant properties telling people what was happening there. This is being rezoned, or this is coming soon, and I just think people don't, and that was way before social media was a thing, so I'm a big fan of just sort of obvious education, like, hey, this right here, this is what you get for that, so. And when these things fail by 3 votes and it's $3 a month, it's super hard to understand. Again, people do what they do, but it's just really hard. Then you come back and complain, and it's like, well, wait, what? So anyway, I'm with you. Signs. Okay, light. Okay, take them all down when they're done. But you'll take them down. All right. Any other public comment on this question? All right, bring it back to the council.
Yeah, before I make a motion, Scott, it doesn't preclude council members from advocating, not just educating, after it is approved. So in other words, I can go out there and go, hey, guys, vote yes, vote yes, vote yes, as much as I want. Or does it?
As long as you're not using public resources to do that. If you're just making a statement, I'm in support of this, I think that's legally not prohibited. But you can't use, the city can't expend money on advocacy as opposed to education. So again, educating the public on what this ballot measure is going to do, the assessment increase. But you saying, hey, I support this, I'm going to vote yes on this.
And using our personal social media is not public resource.
Correct.
Okay. With that, I'll go ahead and make a motion to consider an assessment increase election in Landscape Maintenance District Number 1, Benefit Zones 2 and 5.
I'll second. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries again. 3 in favor, no opposed, and 2 absent. Thank you. Item number 17 is consider approval. Is it approval or is it just present and discuss? Okay. Present and discuss the general plan update strategy report and authorize staff to initiate a comprehensive general plan update. Hello, team. Renee. Or Dave, or Ben, or all of you.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Dave Merchant, I'm the city planner. I'll be starting the discussion and introducing it. Speaking of introductions, to the far left is Ben Ritchie from De Novo Planning Group. Ben is going to be doing the bulk of the presentation this evening. And then right next to me, to my left, is Renee Mathis. She's our planning director, or director of planning and development services, and then she's going to wrap up the discussion here after Ben presents.
Can I just say one thing for the record? We have one public comment from the BIA supporting the staff recommendation, so just for the record. All right, thanks, Dave.
I'd also like to thank Lily Chaw, our senior planner that's responsible for long-range and advanced planning. She put together the bulk of the staff report, and she'll have a role, a significant role going forward if the council authorizes us to proceed. So jumping right in, the purpose of the meeting today is to present the information that we've provided to you in written form, to make a presentation regarding the general plan strategy report. And following that consideration, staff will recommend to you that you authorize the initiation of a comprehensive update to the general plan. A little bit of background in terms of how we got here this evening. Back in May of 2022, the council authorized an agreement with De Novo to conduct a review of the existing general plan. We're calling it a review, or audit is the term we've sometimes used, but the primary objective has been to assist the city in determining the appropriate scope and methodology for a general plan update. Originally, that scope discussion included a consideration of whether this might be a focused update or a comprehensive update. What are some of the strategies and methods that we could use to have an effective update, however it might be authorized. And what you're saying this evening is support for a comprehensive update. As part of de novo's work, they included an analysis of legislative requirements, identification of industry best practices, which is really one of the benefits of having a consultant that does this a lot, prepare the work for us. And then they obtained feedback from a variety of stakeholders, including stakeholder surveys, a specific discussion with our department head group, and then notably a joint meeting of the Planning Commission and Council back in February. This is obviously a focused item on the general plan, so just a little bit of background regarding what the general plan does for a city. A general plan is a representation of the vision for how a community will grow, and it reflects the community's priorities and values. The land use component is generally the most visible component of a general plan. It does establish the legal underpinning for land use decisions, but the general plan covers more than just land use. It also includes open space, circulation, conservation, housing, noise, and safety. Those are the 7 required elements for every general plan. And then we also get to look at air quality and environmental justice as additional concerns. Every city and county in California has to have a general plan update, or general plan, excuse me. But it's up to the local agencies to determine the timing and the frequency of those updates. With the exception of the housing elements, as you know, they need to be updated every 8 years. With that in mind, looking backwards, our current general plan was adopted back in August of 2014 as a comprehensive update to the 1993 general plan. And at the same time, there was a comprehensive update to the development code. That whole effort took about 5.5 years, about 67 months to process. That's a fairly long process, but I think Ben would tell you not the longest he's seen. Part of that was due to some funding limitations. Other considerations were just a significant number of General Plan Advisory Committee meetings. I think there were at least 30 during that process. As a kind of a traditional number, general plans are updated maybe every 10 to 15 years. I've seen them done at 20 or 20 plus years. 10 to 15 years is probably relatively common. And then there are several factors that are combining to lead to our recommendation to initiate this process now, and then Ben's going to go through the process to describe what some of those factors are as part of this presentation. And with that in mind, I'll hand it over to Ben to walk you through the General Plan Strategy Report.
Thank you very much, Dave. Mayor, Council, Ben Ritchie, Principal of de novo Planning Group. It's great to see everybody again. So, yeah, I'll try not to be redundant and move quickly through these first few slides. So as Dave mentioned, we were retained to prepare this audit or strategy report. Some of the primary questions we were tasked with asking as we came into this process is, what's the city's vision for itself now? You hadn't done a full public outreach effort on these types of questions and this breadth of questions since your last general plan update. And so as the community articulated its vision to us of where things stand now, how well does your current general plan meet those goals, objectives, and priorities? Another question or lens we looked at your general plan through is what were the critical changes to state law that have taken place since your last general plan was adopted, and what needs to happen to your current plan to comply with state law and current legislation? And so ultimately we were tasked with coming up with strategies and recommendations for what a comprehensive or a partial update would look like in order to help inform a scope of work that would go into a request for proposals so the city could initiate the consultant selection process for a general plan update. So in terms of how we went about this effort, we started with a pretty broad-based stakeholder outreach. So we reached out to individual groups such as the BIA, representatives of the business community, various service providers, department heads. As you recall, we held a workshop with the Planning Commission and the City Council. So we distributed a number of surveys and questionnaires as part of that effort. We did a pretty detailed review of the regulatory requirements that have been enacted since your last general plan was adopted and how your plan does or does not comply with those. This all led us to identification of a range of issues that will probably need to be tackled by the city as part of any subsequent update. And ultimately, we prepared a strategies and recommendations report that lays out what we see as your best approach to a general plan update in terms of what tasks to include, key considerations, and where dollars might be most effectively spent to achieve your objectives. So this is certainly not a comprehensive list, but some of the factors and findings in terms of what may warrant a full comprehensive update to your general plan. These include changes to housing and transportation law, new housing density requirements related to your 6-cycle housing element, which you're working on right now. You've got various environmental and land use constraints in some of the growth areas identified within your current general plan. Over the past several years, the city has seen a number of increase in the number of requests to expand your sphere of influence, to look for new growth and opportunity areas, as well as an increase in the number of requests for general plan amendments. And these can be indications that the current land use map in your existing general plan may not be reflective of market conditions or community and development community desires of where and how to grow. There's also a lot of nuances for water and infrastructure planning, what's available, what's the capacity, what are the funding mechanisms to serve growth areas, and also opportunities for redevelopment of some of your aging shopping centers and commercial corridors that may be in need of a fresh look and perspective from a land use standpoint. So some of the key feedback we received during our stakeholder outreach as part of this process was hearing about the importance of preserving the city's heritage, the old downtown, and your general small town atmosphere that you've cultivated so well here in Clovis, even as you continue to grow. The importance for orderly, cohesive growth that will likely necessitate expansion into the city's sphere of influence. The importance of planning for the extension of infrastructure needed to support your growth and the expansion of the city, which will be confronted with funding challenges, and it needs cohesive planning accordingly. We heard numerous times about, the high quality of services and quality of life, public safety, parks. It's really a hallmark of Clovis and what the city needs to do to be able to grow responsibly and still maintain those high levels of services for residents and businesses, and also the need to explore opportunities on how the city can aggressively attract new industry, businesses, high-wage jobs, and capitalize on its position as a medical hub within the region. So, with all that we learned, all that we analyzed, we are recommending what is generally broken down into a 3-phase work plan for your general plan update. I really want to emphasize these are not discrete tasks where phase 1 decisively concludes and then initiate phase 2. But in general, moving through 3 phases, you would begin by engaging in a very robust public outreach and visioning process, reaching out to all segments of your community, identifying your priorities for yourself, diligently documenting your existing conditions, and really honing in on what the key issues are that you'll address as part of the update that you're undertaking. Phase 2, which I think will be very critical for Clovis, will be identifying your land use alternatives and settling on a preferred land use map. Typically, in a process such as this, you'll want to make critical decisions on where you're going to land in terms of growth areas, allowed uses, areas for growth, densities, things like that, everything on your land use map at around the mid-stage of the process. This allows the city to build the rest of the general plan around the land use map, provide the correct policy support for the trajectory of your growth, and also sets the basis for what will be analyzed in your environmental impact report. So establishing a land use alternatives analysis and framework at about the mid-stage in phase 2, we're strongly recommending. And then the third phase would be actual development and completion of the general plan, the requisite environmental impact report, and ultimately adoptions. And there would be public participation throughout all 3 phases of this work plan. So some of the key milestones and deliverables that we would recommend, very similar to what I just mentioned on the 3 phases. I'd start by establishing an existing conditions report, identifying your community priorities through various outreach mechanisms, and I'll talk more about our recommendations for what public participation might look like in terms of a framework, honing in on your issues and opportunities, establishing your land use alternatives, drafting the goals, policies, and programs of your general plan. I'll also emphasize that in our review and audit of your existing general plan, while it's focused and well-written, it does not include implementation measures or action items. You have goals and policies, and typically a well-rounded general plan will have a series of very specific, discrete implementation measures. I will note that the city is excellent on implementation, but your general plan doesn't necessarily provide the roadmap for what achieving those goals and objectives looks like from that standpoint. Then you'd move through the draft general plan, the EIR, and ultimately public hearings. So some of the aspects of those I'll touch on a little bit more, and really want to emphasize, if you've got questions, please, interrupt and jump in at any point. I could go down the rabbit hole and talk for hours about this stuff, but I promise I won't. So community outreach and participation should obviously be the cornerstone of any general plan update. Our recommendation would be to have an interactive project-specific website that launches at the very beginning of the process, and it's a live, living website throughout the whole multi-year phase or multi-year process of updating the general plan. It's an opportunity for submitting comments, seeing meeting presentations, all the various milestones and documents I touched on the previous slide. Those all get posted to the website. It's really a one-stop shop for public participation. We'd recommend coupling that with social media outreach, newsletters, and just really driving traffic and attention to that one-stop website. Very robust outreach and workshops during the initial visioning phase. This is a combination of educating the community on the importance of the general plan, what it addresses, and then soliciting feedbacks on both very broad general topics and then honing in on more specific issues and topics such as land use and growth. Based on what we've learned, we would recommend the formation of a GPAC or a General Plan Advisory Committee. I believe you had one on your last General Plan update. Certainly not required. Not all cities do them as part of their updates. We do feel Clovis would certainly benefit from that. We would definitely recommend holding community workshops, kind of open house style workshops at key milestones. So getting feedback on the land use alternatives report, feedback on the draft general plan prior to adoption, and just checking in on those key big ticket items with the community to in part educate and then also solicit feedback on drafts that have been prepared. And then ultimately, we would strongly recommend conducting periodic check-ins or study sessions, working group sessions with both the Planning Commission and City Council. You have a lot of discretion if you do those separately, meet with the Commission and the Council, or you hold them as joint workshops. But it's an opportunity for whatever consultant you select to keep you up to date, get council direction on key issues. I can talk more on the next slide about the GPAC and how that might function, but ultimately we'd recommend not having the GPAC be a decision-making body, simply an advisory body. And so you may have split feedback from the GPAC, and those would be very opportune times for your project team to come back to the council, get an update, say, hey, we're at this fork in the road, tell us which direction to take. So in terms of the General Plan Advisory Committee, I've led a lot of those over my career. Kind of recommend a sweet spot in terms of size as being approximately 10 to 14 members. I've done them with council members serving as GPAC members, and I've done them without. There can be significant benefits to having a couple council members that can provide a lot of context on past city efforts or a lot of just really invaluable knowledge about programs or directions the city may have taken in the past and provide a lot of good input. Certainly not necessary to have council members on the GPAC. The GPAC members should represent broad cross-sections of the community and various stakeholders, and they should really understand that their role is to serve as project liaisons and ambassadors, so that we would hope and recommend anyone appointed to the GPAC, they'd be committed to participating throughout the whole process. Certainly folks get on the GPAC because they have a particular interest that they're representing, so you may have representatives from the school board and representatives from the building and development community, but a successful GPAC is not comprised of members that are there advocating for their single issue. I want this piece of land rezoned, or I want more funding for schools. They're there to represent feedback from the community across the whole spectrum of topics that the general plan is going to address. So it puts onus on the council to be very thoughtful in your election or selections and appointments for your GPAC members. And so ultimately the role of the GPAC, again, we'd recommend that they're an advisory body. They'd provide key input at various phases. So a real successful program, you might see GPAC meetings kind of clustered, a couple at the beginning, figure what the trajectory is going to be for this update, cluster some meetings around key topics such as land use, and then cluster some key meetings around reviewing the various elements and making sure the policy language is correct, accurate, and reflective of what the community desires. And the last specific I'll touch on in this presentation is the Land Use Alternatives Report. There's a lot of ways to frame and structure a land use alternatives report, but typically we would recommend that you're looking at 2 to 3 different land use and growth scenarios. What if we were aggressive and grew up here to the northwest, northeast? If we expanded beyond our existing growth areas, looked at additional growth areas, and in addition to just populating colors on a map, it really should have a robust comparative analysis of what the implications of each map are. How much would you grow? What would you expect in terms of jobs and population? What does that mean for traffic volumes and levels of service? What does it mean in terms of, taxing your existing infrastructure? What type of infrastructure expansion would be needed for each of those growth scenarios? What are some of the strategies to pay for that infrastructure expansion? Because ultimately, at the end of the land use alternatives phase of the general plan, the project team would come back to you and seek direction on, let's pick this map now. We're not officially adopting it, but let's determine the map that we're going to build the general plan around. And that's a big ticket item for the council to provide direction on. And so this can provide a very useful tool and to foster informed decision making. So as you're selecting a growth plan, you understand the economic, the fiscal, infrastructure, traffic, and various service conditions, pros and cons that would go along with each land use option presented to you. So we expect this to be a robust, potentially up to 1 year iterative process that would really kind of be the central anchor to a general plan update. We see opportunities for a lot of new issues and new elements to be added into your general plan. Dave mentioned the state mandated requirements. There's 7. We have to address environmental justice. It doesn't necessarily need to be a standalone element. Based on the feedback we've heard, we think you would benefit from a healthy communities and environmental justice element as a standalone. Parks and recreation are obviously of paramount importance to the community. You could have a standalone parks and recreation element. You could build upon your existing economic development element by making it more robust, specific, and also adding in the topics of fiscal sustainability. You could do a historic preservation element with emphasis and policies for Old Town Clovis, and we would also recommend the inclusion of an implementation element. So if you were to do the update, include action items or implementation measures. The implementation element sort of describes how those will be carried out over time, can prioritize them. A good general plan might have a 10, 15, 20-year to-do list attached to it. So where do you start? So these are Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 implementation priorities, and it can also be an excellent tool for both the council and staff to track progress on implementation post-adoption. In general, for your general plan update, I would bank on a 3-year schedule from project kickoff through adoption. I think with the number of issues, land use considerations, trying to do it quicker than that will feel a bit rushed and forced. Much longer than that, you went through the last round. No one likes to go 5.5 years. You get some PTSD from a process like that. So
I was just thinking of PTSD. I think we should not say 67 months, and those are a few of you that did that for 67 months. I'm so sorry. Okay, yes, I have PTSD just hearing the number.
But you lose momentum. You lose it. You get fatigue.
Among other things.
I don't have to explain all the pitfalls to going too long. But 3 years is a sweet spot. Some of the recommendations I would give to the city, staff and the council, have a dedicated project manager on city staff, and this is their baby, and they have enough time allocated to shepherd this through. You keep your consultant on track and accountable. You keep the council on track. Everybody's aware of when key milestones and decisions need to be made. And to the council, be prepared to make key decisive decisions at these milestones. It can be tempting to put off final land use decisions to the end, but you need to build a whole EIR around what the growth is from your general plan land use map, and that EIR takes many months to write. So you need to know what you're analyzing before you're ready to adopt that general plan. And come up with a good work plan, hire the right team, and then stick to the plan and just keep moving through it and make those key decisions at the key milestones. That's the type of advice I would give to a city as you embark on this process. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. I can go down the rabbit hole on any of those, but I'll hand it back over to staff.
Thank you, Ben. Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the council. So I want to kind of circle back with what staff is requesting tonight. Again, this was to consider the general plan update strategy report, which is what Ben presented. We want to be able to answer any questions you have regarding that strategy report, and then staff is specifically requesting that the council authorize us to initiate the process to begin a comprehensive general plan update. So if council chooses to do that tonight, what staff would do is begin to prepare a scope of work for a request for proposals that would then solicit consultants that could come on board and prepare that general plan update. The strategies report that is presented to you tonight would be the basis for that scope of work, plus any comments we receive from council. So before I wrap up, the timing for that, our priority right now is working on the housing element. As you know, we are shooting for having the housing element completed by December. I don't know that that will happen. We just received comments back from HCD. We're working very closely on that, but the general plan update would follow right after that. That doesn't mean we would start the scope of work, RFP. We would start that now. The staff project manager will ultimately manage the consultant agreement and coordinate all of the city contributions for that general plan update. As Dave mentioned earlier, Lily Cha has been actively involved in the housing element. She would be part of our general plan update team helping to lead that project. The timeline should anticipate, as Ben indicated, about 3 years from execution of a consultant agreement. If council chooses to have staff initiate that process tonight, we anticipate it'll take about 4 months to get the RFP out, a selection consultant interview completed, and then a recommendation before council. So we're looking in early 2024 to be back in front of council with our recommendation for that consultant. Again, Ben spent a little bit of time talking about the establishment of a GPAC. I think that is an important
Testing 1, 2, 3. You're good.
Go ahead.
Ben and Dave and Renee, thank you for the work thus far. You know, in your discussions with the community, did the question ever come up where, you know, your recommendation is 2 or 3 growth areas, where they say no more growth areas? Did that ever come up?
Not to the nuanced level of don't grow here, do grow there. The 2 to 3 doesn't represent 2 or 3 areas to look at growth. It was 2 or 3 new versions of your land use map.
Okay.
And so one version might have 10, 15, I mean, it could have massive growth areas. So we didn't get down to the granular question of should we be growing here or not growing there. Those are more nuanced questions that you would ask as part of outreach of a general plan update. Okay. We talked broadly of should we be revisiting the land use map, but we didn't talk about where and how growth should or should not occur at geographic locations.
So that question then would happen after the process starts?
Yes, I would.
Okay.
Those would be cornerstones to select workshops and work products as part of the update. So our question asking at this stage was, do you even need to look at your land use map? Do we have a perfectly fine one and we don't want to grow? And because we've done general plan updates where we comprehensively update it, but we didn't touch the map.
Yeah.
We distinctly learned that you're going to want to look at your map. Yeah. But where, how, and what, we didn't get to that level, but that would be a key part of the actual update process.
I mean, even not looking at economic, you know, commercial centers to parks, RENA is going to
force us to look at this regardless, correct, for the next 20, 30 years. Because, whatever we colored the current general plan, it's not going to be able to incorporate the 9,000 new units that 6 cycle is doing, 7 cycle, 8 cycle. We don't even know how many those are. And so I think when we get there, it needs to be clearly painted to our citizens. If you don't grow, that's fine, but you still are going to be in charge of 10,000 homes every 4 years, every 5 years. So either it goes on top, scrape and build, or we plan and we grow. Because I think citizens don't understand that, so they go, we have enough. Why do we need to grow? Why do we need to plan? But yet the state plots all these homes on. So then, okay, then we change it, but now we just go up, So be ready, Clovis, if you don't want to plan. And so I don't know when those questions get brought forward clearly, but I think they need to be, so that way we understand why we want to plan, why we want to assess the land uses again to move forward, so that way we can be better situated than making Clovis look like something someone who comes back here 20 years from now and go, I can't even recognize this town because it's changed so much.
And when these workshops are done correctly, it starts with, here are the questions we're asking, here's why we're asking these questions, and then here's some specific questions to get your feedback on. So a good general plan consultant will be part educator and then part toolkit to help deliver the plan that the community articulates that they want.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge question, Renee, up front, that I think we need to really lay down before we even start dreaming and we're not dreaming of what Clovis should be. My other question is, you in the EIR section or in the IR when it gets there, should we plan for whatever land uses we decide, plus do an EIR of potential uses that we don't anticipate? So, for example, right now, someone can do fourplex, all that kind of stuff on single lot, but our EIR was only for a single-family home, yet they can do something else. So, in other words, our studies of our infrastructure or water was for the land use that is in the piece of paper, not for what the state has mandated. So, as we move forward, do we plan two EIRs or one EIR that studies both? So that way, as a city, our infrastructure is able to accommodate whatever, the color change that the state mandates down. Does that question make sense?
It does, and it's an excellent and nuanced question.
Yeah.
I'll try and provide a good answer without geeking out on you with going down too much planning. What we would recommend is to develop a set of build-out assumptions for your preferred land use map. And what you will end up with is a level of growth that you realistically anticipate from that map, and also a level of growth that could be accommodated by that map. And there's a difference, because you have density levels now, and I don't have the math in front of me, but you have not built to your maximum density even on your fully developed parcels, but you could have. And in order to have a proper legally defensible EIR, the EIR should look at what could be developed. So this is a discussion I have with lots of councils with your land use map. We'll come back with numbers saying, here's the build-out projection for EIR purposes. Don't freak out. This isn't what we think is going to happen in terms of population or jobs growth, but it's allowed. It could happen. So you use the EIR to give yourself legal coverage for full build-out of your general plan so that you can tier and use it for streamlining of subsequent environmental review of individual projects. However, I would not use your EIR numbers to get down to the granular level of your infrastructure master plans and what needs to be funded and financed for the next 5 and 10 years, because the EIR is representing what could be built, but not what is necessarily likely to be built over a more discrete, shorter time frame. So you'll still have your master plans, you'll still update those periodically, 5 years, as you do your CIPs, but you'll have excellent CEQA environmental umbrella coverage under your EIR. So our recommendation would be you pick one scenario, but it's conservative on the upper end of growth, but you don't build all of your master planning efforts specifically around that. You have more partitioned out projections for 5 and 10 year increments.
I say that because Dave and Renee, the RENA numbers that we put in, the fourth or fifth cycle that we put in, that was never studied in an EIR, correct? Because, yeah, so we just did it after the fact because the state mandated. And so how do we plan for those as a city to be ready? Because it doesn't just affect, is there enough sufficient water? Are the sewer lines sufficient? Do we have enough police for those extra homes and the extra, do we have enough fire? Do we have enough? And so how do we, you know, I know it's difficult, but I'm just laying the question out there to go, how do we plan for that? And how do we get ready for that? So that way our city, should something happen where we are mandated, because a lot of those processes now are without a public hearing. So no one's coming in to challenge a CEQA, right? No one's coming in to challenge, hey, was there enough water? Because the state is exempting itself, or whoever's coming to build. And so how do we best plan so that way the vacant lots that we are coloring now and going, okay, all these single family, potentially can also be 20 units per acre. And so how do we study, how do we make it ready? Does that make sense? I think you understand. So I think that's something in which is a challenge for the GPAC, for us as we move forward, because if we just go by what we color, it may be where I think we won't be ready. Yeah, we may have infrastructure and services that won't be able to help us for the next 30 to 50 years. And then with the timeline, will the scope come back to us prior to it going out, or today's the meeting and the scope will not come back?
Council could direct staff to come back. That's not what we're recommending. I think we would tier off of the strategies report that's before you tonight, that's been discussed, and that would be used as the baseline for creating that, you know, scope of work or the RFP. Now, if council would like to have it come back, we can definitely do that. It just adds time.
Okay. And did this go before the Planning Commission already, this report, so that way they can get feedback prior to it getting to the scope?
This did not go to the Planning Commission. We did provide this strategies report to over 100 entities. Planning Commission was included for review and comment. We do have a Planning Commission on Thursday night, and we would be taking this item before the Commission to discuss the actions tonight. We do have all of our Planning Commissioners here. We asked them to participate, at least listening in so they could hear the discussion.
Yeah, I would encourage our planning commissioners. I know that we had one joint meeting, but if there's something in which you feel strongly should be in the scope, please, your input is valuable to sort of, you know, the future of our city. And I know that some of these documents are long, but you guys have always been valuable in giving direction to the staff and providing direction for the city as we move forward. So that's all I have for now.
Thanks, Wong. Diane, any questions? So I think just a couple comments. So I think this is one of the most important things that cities do, and I think it's super fun. And I think 67 months really did set people back. Like, I think I can see my friends out there going, never signing up again. So I think that we need to have some sensitivity to that. And the highest and best use of the GPAC is not 67 meetings. That's our 67 months or meetings, or I don't know. So I just, to those of you that served, God love you, and we promise it will not be 67 months. So anyway, but I think it's super important. The one thing that I think, a couple things that I think are missing in your summary, if I might, you talk about a vision for how we'll grow. I believe we as a city lack a vision of what we want to be. And I guess in my mind, that is not nuanced, that's clearly different. And we're working on a planning process, and I feel maybe there's a way to merge the two, but I don't want a vision for how to grow without a vision of what I want to be. So I just don't want to miss that step, because I think that's all we have. That's our job here, to create some plan to flex. I just wanted to note that. I didn't see that in the document. So do you want to comment on that?
100% agree with you. It's so easy to focus on land use and growth when talking about a general plan.
Right.
All of the other aspects, from fiscal sustainability to jobs to conservation, historic preservation, they all hold equal weight, and many non-growth issues will be of much greater importance to many sectors of your community. So a visioning process is really not focused on land use. It's focused on who are we, what do we want to be, exactly as you articulated, Madam Mayor. There are steps of an update process that will focus on land use because that tends to be the elephant in the room. And part of the reason we recommend looking at land use at the mid-stage is so that you can round out the entirety of your general plan and say, if this is how we will grow, this is how we will maintain our values as part of that growth. So here's our infrastructure planning, here's our level of service priorities, parks, schools, all those community resources that aren't tied directly to growth. So completely agree.
Yeah, and I feel like this is, maybe they've all been really important for the generations of our city, but I think this is a moment. We're a great city, 125,000. If we keep doing everything the same way we're doing today, we're not going to be a great city at 225,000. So I feel like this general plan will kind of encompass all of those things. I hate to use the word tipping point, but that's kind of what it feels like. And I feel like the general plan is going to be able to kind of chart some of those courses in each of those areas. So I wanted to say that. I think the Parks and Rec dimension, I would maybe rename that as sort of quality of life, because we're trying to build a city for, yes, young families who want to go to Clovis Unified, but people that don't have young families that want to age out here gracefully. So I think that's a generation we've not really accounted for in our city. And I think that's another question. When we did our small community stakeholder discussion on the city, that was something that came up that in my mind I just labeled quality of life, because it's different if I have two small kids or not. So anyway, I think that's an element. And I love the community health element, because that's a quality of life. People want to live in a place in California that they can live an active, healthy lifestyle. And this could be one of the few places left in California where that's possible. So I'm happy to see that, and I might just broaden it out a little bit from Parks and Rec to kind of quality of life sense.
And the one quick comment I would add to that is, staff's intention at this point is to have, as a consultant who responds to these RFPs, the main thing we need to do is understand what's the order of magnitude of this effort, and what type of specialty sub-consultants would we need on our team, and how do we put a bid together that's going to be competitive and enough to cover what the city wants. All these nuanced questions of, do we grow here, do we call it Parks and Rec? We go in expecting to figure that out as we go. And so I think the council's providing staff enough direction to frame a scope. And, if someone came in and said, we're giving you a Parks and Recs element, and you said, well, no, I'd like it to be a quality of life, a good consultant will say, fantastic, let's figure out what that means. And it's all in that work plan.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I wasn't trying to edit your document. To me, I was excited about that, and I think it's a bigger question. So I think in the scoping, I think there are bigger questions about the kind of place we want to be, and then the way land use gets us to those places. I think that's what the general plan is trying to acknowledge.
And that's what you learn through the process.
Yeah, and I thought your point about being an educator is really important, because I've been thinking about our housing challenges, and I do feel like at some point we're going to need to do a community town hall on what's happening here. It's not the way we've grown previously, and it's not better or worse, it's just not the same. And I think that's got to be sort of front and center in the general plan, because our days of 9,000 square foot lots, it's going to be hard to hold on to that. Now, we're going to do it better than anyone. We're going to have the best community around with smaller lots or higher density, whatever that is. But I do think the education piece is a huge, because we can't come in and just think we're just going to keep building another 20 years, just like we've done now, because I don't think I know that that's not possible. So I thought, I appreciate your educator comment. And just to be clear, do we have the staff bandwidth to dedicate somebody to be a full-time project manager for this work? Because I feel like it's a full-time job for 2 years. Sorry, not to do your job for you, but it can't be like 20% of our time. Otherwise, it'll be 67 months.
Yeah, that's why we've outlined the timing that we have, that the housing element really does need to be our high priority.
We have the bandwidth to do that at some point.
Yeah, as the housing element gets closer to adoption, we'll free up some bandwidth, and this will become the priority for our advanced planning lead, which at this point is Lily.
Okay. Okay, and then I think my final comment, I was gonna make the same comment about belonging to the Planning Commission. So you all meet on Thursday. If we act tonight and move forward, and on Thursday you all say, oh my gosh, how did you not say this or that? I would ask staff to come back and just help us modify if we did something that we missed or the scoping needs to be different, but kind of we're out of order, but I think what you all see in the document is super important. So if you can, feel free to come back and edit the whatever ends up doing it here. But anyway, I think it's a super exciting project. Thank you for the audit-ish or whatever you did here. But I think it's really, really exciting. So do you have another comment?
Yeah, just commenting on the 4 items. I agree with the mayor that this is a pivotal time in the city of Clovis in which those families who have been here since the inception and or many generations, that historical part, I think, is critical. And we have to be intentional in this general plan to go, what is the history of Clovis? How do we preserve those? So that way it is a destination and or a historical telling of that's what Clovis is. And so how do we incorporate all that into it so when someone comes here, they'll remember the different, families that made Clovis what it is. And that leads to sort of what Mayor said about we plan a lot for new families. Let's plan for current families and or seniors, and I said it as a senior community. But where do our grandparents go? And where do grandparents look to go to? Let's be intentional. Make them come here. Make them want to come here, where they'll feel safe. They'll have all the roads out. So in other words, how do we also plan for that? And it could be new home products in which seniors go, I'm going to retire there. Because everyone's retiring in Arizona, everywhere else. But no one's coming. A lot of us want to stay here and see our children go through, our grandchildren go through the schools. And so how do we make it so that way, hey, seniors, you are welcome here. We're going to plan for you, and we're going to create a product in which you will be able to thrive here with young families as well, because they're not looking for the school district. So what is it that will keep our seniors here and keep them thriving right here? Because then we can just draw on each other. And so that I don't know how it gets put on paper and how it becomes a priority, but I believe that that's important, and it leads to your quality of life discussion in which now, we do it in nonprofits, cradle to career. This is a city cradle to career, from beginning all the way to your career, and even to when you will leave here, and your parents will, or your kids will visit you here when you have gone, to the afterlife. And then that's what we want. That's where we want to be able to establish, because we don't want even our employees, when they finish, to go, well, I'm looking to get out of here. We want them to go, no, I'm going to stay here and leave my mark, and I'm going to be buried here, so that my kids and my grandkids will always see me here. And that's something we got to want. Because if we don't, then it's gone, whether it's a building or a tree or a neighborhood, however we develop. So how do we get that in there as well?
I was going to make a joke, but I won't. Okay. Okay, I'll make it. I was going to say more land for Clovis Cemetery. I don't know, but I think that's right. I do think it's kind of we don't typically talk about that aging in place, and we don't have any senior products here that we could, and we could be the best place for families to, have their folks. So anyway, enough of that. All right, public comment. Anyone wishing to comment on this? Mr. Harris? Please come on up to the microphone, and if you state your name and address. Nobody say 67 months. Nobody say 67 months. Go ahead. Your name, please, and address if you're willing.
Yeah, my name is Durbin Loren Jr. My address is actually 46 Pulaski. I live right here in Old Town Clovis. I'm here representing on behalf of the Ellis family. We've been building apartments and commercial stuff throughout the city of Clovis and Fresno. I believe in the city of Clovis as early as 76 was the Scotsman Apartments. And I'm here might be a little prematurely. We hope that the general plan amendment gets authorized also. But more specifically on the property on Herndon Villa, we're the owners of that property and have been the owners for many of years. And that's something that we hope that possibly the land use gets changed in the general plan from commercial to medium to high density multifamily. So that's pretty much all.
Sounds like a volunteer. Thank you for your comments. Appreciate it. Thank you for being here tonight. Mr. Harris? How many of these have you sat through, my friend? A few of these? Me and the...
Mayor and members of the council, Jeffrey Harris, representing Wilson Homes, address 7550 North Palm in Fresno. First of all, I am aging out. I hope it's gracefully, but that's up for you to decide.
Me, on that front too.
I want to reiterate something that Ben said. I want to compliment Ben. It was an excellent presentation. And one of the items that he made it a point of mentioning that I think the council needs to take note of is that the current general plan, Ben said it more gracefully than this, but it could have been better had it had specific implementation measures. And clearly your intent is to include that in this round. And that is an important component, and I strongly encourage us to move down that pathway. In my former life, before I worked for Leo for all these years, as some of you know, I was the executive officer of the local Building Industry Association, and before that I worked for the Building Industry Association in San Diego County. So very sadly, I have served on many, many, many general plan advisory committees. I served on yours starting in '93, and then there was the one that went, I think, for 18 years.
67 years is probably more like it, but yeah,
man,
go ahead.
It was long and painful. But what I would suggest to you is, as has been identified, there is a sweet spot size of any general plan advisory committee, in my personal opinion. I think it's been well identified by your staff, and I would say that's 10 to 12. And having 10 to 12 meetings as well is really appropriate, not 362. So that's something to really take very seriously as you go along here. Toward that end, I would encourage the council and the members of the Planning Commission not to serve as General Plan Advisory Committee members. They're open meetings, of course. As leaders of our community, you would certainly be welcome. I would encourage you to attend as many as possible, and I would encourage you to be very vocal in those meetings as the leaders of our community, the Planning Commission as well as the council. Your views are critical and important, but to take up what I would deem to be slots that provide an opportunity for others to provide a voice, I think would be a mistake. But again, that's not to say don't attend. I think it would be also equally a mistake if the council and members of the Planning Commission did not attend regularly. And last but not least, I want to encourage you, again, as council members, to be very, very vocal and be very bold in articulating for the General Plan Advisory Committee, for the consultant and the staff, what your visions are. Your visions may not all be exactly the same, and for all of the council members to articulate even the differences, I hope you don't feel compelled to agree on everything, because none of us agree on everything. And it's critical for you to be a voice of the community and insert yourselves into that process and voice your deeply held opinions. And if you do that, I think what you'll find is you'll have a very, very successful general plan update process. So just thoughts from an old guy who's gracefully exiting.
Thank you, Jeff. Others?
Hello, my name is Brent Burdine. I live at 497 West Keats Avenue. And I have two issues. The first is a question for the de novo consultant, and that was, my understanding was that you consulted government entities, business entities, and organizations along those lines. But nor did I hear that the Clovis community, Clovis residents were consulted in your fact-finding. And my concern was that are Clovis residents considered stakeholders in the general plan, or are we just something to be educated at a future date? And I understand, and the other is an observation, and I do agree with you, absolutely, Mayor, that in your statement that Clovis is one of the few remaining California cities that have a quality of life. And there's a reason for that. And I think going forward on this plan, you've got to tread carefully, because I understand that in the next 5 years, there's a tremendous amount of money that can be made for you individually and for people. But, you know, who are you going to serve? So it's going to be an interesting 67 months. So.
I said, don't say 67. Don't ever say that again. Thank you for your, I'm kidding. Thanks for your comments.
That's what the expert says.
No, that's how long it took. Yeah, it was painful. I mean, just to answer your question directly, those citizens are the key stakeholders. This place belongs to all of us. It does not belong to us five, those five, the 40 people interviewed. I mean, it does belong to all, and I think it's our job to create the most engaging, outward-facing signs in parks, social media, whatever it would take to get people to talk about this work. So 100%.
Well, I appreciate it, and I think situations like we have in this room, it doesn't happen in Fresno, and it doesn't happen in a lot of other cities in California because they've lost that quality of life, quality of living. And we have one of the few functioning small governments left. So I appreciate all the work you do and all the work that you're doing as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Brent. Appreciate your comments. Others? Anyone else?
Paul Hinkle. I was on the last general plan committee, so I know what you're talking about. It was a long, long time. I've grown into the senior community. In the last year and a half, I've gotten into another group in the community, and that's the handicapped. And I've met lots of people that are in that part of it, and I view what's going on from a different angle now. I really see things that Clovis needs to address that we haven't addressed. And we really can't wait for the general plan to address it, because when we pass a general plan, it's probably another 2 years before it really happens. So we're looking at maybe 7, 8 years before it really takes effect. Well, I don't know if you guys heard about, they put out a notice that by the year of 2035 in the United States, there will be 1.3 million people 100 years or older. So we need to look at this, and we need to look at it now so that we can, as you guys brought up, pull them into Clovis. You know, they don't want to live in one of these homes. They want to live in their own home, but they have problems. Is that when you get older, Sacramento doesn't want you to drive your car anymore. So how do you get around? Well, you walk with some aid if you can, but you're limited to how far you can walk. You have wheelchairs, you have electric scooters. But a thing I have noticed in my travel through the United States, mainly the Midwest to the West Coast and all the different states, they've adopted the use of golf carts because they can't drive a car, but they can drive these golf carts. And they have developed and are developing communities where there's golf cart travel within this community to a local small shopping center because they need food. They need to be able to go out and eat somewhere. They need gas for some things, some of them that still can drive. stuff. So we need to look at how we're going to develop our developments that we have going on today to keep those people here so that they can be accommodated and feel welcome in the city of Clovis, because we are the best city in all my travels, the best city I've ever traveled in or lived in. And I went to an event outside of St. Louis about 3 months ago, and it's a park that was just unbelievable. But in this event on a Friday evening, there was probably 1,500 to 2,000 people in this small park with a big theater, with the baseball game going on, and they had food trucks, they had umbrellas, gazebos, everything, but they had a parking lot. It was pretty good size, and there was 25 to 30 golf carts in this parking lot. So we need to start looking at that, and it needs to be a part of our general plan. We need to look at senior citizens, because no one cares about us, really. They see us there, but they really don't know what we're going through. Some of you will fall into this area within the next 18 months. It's just natural for the people. But we need to look at these people and take care of them. Keep them here on it. And I wouldn't mind helping out with the GPAC again, if possible.
If it's not 67 months.
Is it? Yeah.
Thank you for your comments, Paul. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for your service on the Planning Commission as well. Anyone else? All right. Anyone online, Carrie?
No.
All right. So the action before us tonight is to authorize staff to initiate a comprehensive general plan update as outlined by our team, and subject to whatever the Planning Commission, if there's something else they would add, to include that feedback as well. So that is the action in front of us, and I would entertain a motion to that effect if there was one.
Mayor, is there a way to, or staff, to where the scope can be shared, but it doesn't need approval, or there's input somehow before it gets out? I think that there's benefit in us seeing the scope for that RFP, so that way we can kind of look and go, okay, maybe there is something, because until we get there, it's difficult for us to imagine what we are envisioning in this process.
Absolutely. If council's desire is for us to prepare
and it can be some informational.
This scope and bring it back to council, we can definitely do that. We would be releasing it out, to the public for solicitation, so we could do that. That wasn't a step we were recommending, but we absolutely, if that is council's desire, will.
Are you asking to bring it back for us to act on it, or to edit it, or adjust it, or just to know it?
I think that we should be able to still add to it. But then if there's already a process in which the public is adding to it, and we can just do it as a private citizen as well. So that's why I don't want to make it where it delays your process, because that's not what I want at all. I want it to go as quickly as possible. So I don't want to add 68, right, instead of 57. So.
You're the 68th month long. This is why it took so long.
So typically when a scope of work is prepared, staff doesn't present that to the public as part of, we're preparing this scope of work. Give us input on what that scope looks like. That was the action tonight, and all the work that's been done over the past year plus. But if it's council's desire to actually see the scope of work as staff would prepare it, we can definitely bring that back for your review and comment and approval. And then once we get that, then send it out for solicitation to receive proposals from the eligible community consultants.
I don't think it's up to you to join in. If not, I'm okay with it not coming back as well. So, but
I'm okay that we don't see it. I mean, I think there's been, but I want to see it. I don't know that I need to act on it. I think there'll be lots of times in the iterations of it to adjust it as it goes. The scope is just a way to get people to respond. It's not the work specifically. So I would be okay if we I really am. I mean, when you think that it's 3 years from January and it's only August and it's maybe, I worry that we're 5 years out. And that's what scares me. Everything we add is 5 years from now, so.
So if this provides a level of comfort, based on council's action tonight, we'll prepare that scope of work. When it's released, we'll let council know. Once it's released, you'll see what the general parameters are. I think Ben kind of summarized, it's really to let a consultant know, what are you bidding on? What are the general parameters? The fine details that council has provided some feedback on, that will be part of the process once a consultant is on board. Like we do with all of our requests for proposals, if, we come back to council with a recommendation once we have a selected consultant, you would then have an opportunity at that point to review the detail of what that proposal is and who the consultant is for approval.
And in this scope of work, I wrote down, and then I appreciate, Jeff, you bringing it up. You will give guidance with regards to that implementation roadmap component in which our current general plan kind of lacks, right, Ben or the staff? Because if we don't have it, I don't know what that is, and so that's why it would be.
Yeah, I think we would include in the description of our desired end product that it would include an implementation component.
Okay. Thank you.
So is there a motion? Sure.
Okay. What is the motion, Scott? I mean, are we?
It's to authorize staff to initiate a comprehensive general plan update.
Okay. I'll make a motion to authorize staff to initiate a comprehensive general plan update.
I'll second it.
Is there any other discussion? There's a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 3 in favor, no one opposed, and 2 absent. Thank you all for your comments. 66 months to go. Thanks, everybody. City manager comments.
I have none.
Council comments. Diane.
I have none.
Long. I have 2. I went to an FCTA meeting to report out an FCTA. I think it was a pretty standard agenda item. I brought it, but I can't find it now. So anyway, and I do have a question for our fire chief. Fire chief. Oh, no. It's a curiosity question, I think. I think it would be interesting, I've had a few folks inquire, with the incredible losses in Lahaina, and, our hearts go out to that community. People have said, well, Old Town is a little bit like Lahaina. And I think it would be interesting at some point, not urgent, but it would be interesting to have a little education session from our fire department on our kind of emergency action plans for our higher risk areas like Old Town. I know you have a plan for the hospital on that campus. That's one thing. It's all sprinklered and all new and all that. But I just think it would be an interesting education, at least for me. I've never really thought about that. But what is that fire action plan for Old Town? I know we've had one fire that I can recall in one of the buildings there that you got to quite quickly. But anyway, I think about the devastation, and we would be devastated if Old Town just disappeared. So it would be, I would appreciate that at some point if my colleagues are okay with that. Not urgent, but when you have time to kind of prepare that, I think it'd be really great to know about that. Yeah, thank you so much. All right, and I think that concludes council comments, and the meeting is now adjourned at 8:13. Our next meeting is September 5th on a Tuesday night in September. Thank you all for being here.